When scientists study ancient human DNA, they usually expect to find a completely normal history of families branching out over thousands of years, growing wider and more diverse. Instead, when they looked at one specific group, they discovered a mathematical reality that seemed entirely impossible. They examined a modern population of roughly 10 million people and realized that almost all of them appear to trace back to an incredibly tiny handful of ancestors. How could millions of people walking the earth today come from such a remarkably small group? The sheer numbers simply did not make sense, leaving researchers trying to solve a genetic puzzle that defied everything they thought they knew about how human populations grow. So what exactly did scientists find hidden inside this unique DNA? To understand this mystery, you have to look at the story of Ashkenazi Jews. This is a Jewish community that spent almost 2,000 years living in exile across Central and Eastern Europe. Today, this group represents a massive global population numbering around 10 million individuals. But when geneticists started mapping out their DNA, they noticed something highly unusual and completely unexpected. Across this huge group of people, there was a level of genetic similarity that you would normally only expect to find in a small, isolated village. It was as if everyone, no matter where they lived in the world today, was part of one giant, deeply connected extended family. Why would millions of people, scattered across different continents, share such incredibly similar DNA? The answer finally came when researchers started comparing modern genomes using powerful, advanced computer models. The major discovery was absolutely staggering. The models showed that the entire modern population of 10 million people traces its genetic roots back to an effective founding group of just about 350 individuals. These few hundred ancestors lived in medieval Europe roughly 600 to 800 years ago. Imagine an entire massive forest with millions of towering trees growing from just a single handful of seeds. Scientists call this a population bottleneck. Because the population grew from such a tight constriction without mixing much with outside groups, those original family ties were perfectly preserved like a genetic time capsule. The DNA is so tightly woven together that any two Ashkenazi Jews today, regardless of their current geographic location, share enough identical genetic segments to be considered, at most, 30th cousins. But computer models and mathematical calculations are just theories, until you can prove them with hard, physical evidence. That undeniable proof finally emerged from the ground in an unexpected way. In Norwich, England, construction workers accidentally uncovered a medieval well containing human remains that dated all the way back to the 12th century. Later, researchers studied another medieval Jewish cemetery in Erfurt, Germany, dating back to the 14th century. By extracting ancient DNA preserved deep inside the dense bones and teeth of these skeletons, scientists could finally look back in time and compare medieval people directly to modern populations. The results were absolutely astonishing. The skeletons from hundreds of years ago already carried the exact same unique genetic patterns and specific variations that we see in the living population today. The mystery only deepened because this proved the incredibly tight genetic pattern had already formed long before these medieval people were even buried. What this incredible discovery tells us is a sweeping story of profound survival, movement, and resilience. The DNA maps out a history of a people who formed strict, close-knit communities while facing intense persecution and forced migrations across Europe. During the Middle Ages, catastrophic events and extreme isolation shrank their genetic pool down to those original few hundred founders. But instead of fading away into history, this tiny medieval community survived the severe constriction. The ancient DNA from the German cemetery showed that distinct groups from Western and Eastern regions were eventually forced to merge together as they moved further east. They erased their regional differences to become one unified people. Following this intense period of survival, they experienced a massive, rapid population explosion. History, forced migrations, and the sheer will to survive quite literally shaped the genetic story of millions of people. A very small, tightly knit medieval community walked through a severe historical bottleneck and eventually grew into millions of people today. It is a powerful example of how human history leaves permanent, visible traces inside our DNA. The struggles, The extreme isolation and the eventual triumph of a few hundred individuals are locked securely inside the genetic code of a massive global population. Inside every strand of DNA is a magnificent story of survival, and sometimes that story begins with far fewer people than anyone ever imagined.